Welcome back to second part of the class. Let's learn physics. X-rays video part 2. So in this part, let us see the Moseley's law. Moseley's law is an empirical law proposed in the year 1913 by Moseley concerning the characteristic X-rays that are emitted by atoms. It states that the frequencies are proportional to the squares of whole numbers that are equal to atomic number plus a constant. Mathematically given as square root of frequency is equal to some constant A into Z minus B, or just by taking a square of that equation, frequency nu is equal to A into Z minus B whole square, where A and B are positive constants for one type of X-rays, maybe alpha rays or beta rays like K alpha, L alpha, M alpha characteristic X-rays, or L beta, K beta, M beta, like that, where B is known as a screening constant of shielding effect and Z minus B as effective nuclear charge. For K series, the value of A, the constant A in the equation, is square root of 3 RC by 4, and that of the constant B is equal to 1. Here R is the Rydberg constant, C is the speed of light. For L series of X-ray characteristic X-ray lines, the value of A is root of 5 RC divided by 36 and B is 7.4. For K alpha line using Bohr atomic model, so he found out the frequency of a particular X-ray characteristic line using this equation. So energy of a particular X-ray characteristic line is E is equal to h nu, or that is equal to ionization energy of those particular levels. It means initial level and the final level. Initial level means from which level or which shell the electron has gone under transition to the final shell. It means the shell was vacancy was created in this final shell. Electron was made available for transition from this shell. So it is equal to mass of the electron, charge of the electron to the power 4, Z minus 1 whole square, where Z is the atomic number of the metal target, divided by 8 h square epsilon naught square into 1 divided by 1 square minus 1 divided by 2 square. It means 1 square and 2 square, they are nothing but n1 square and n2 square values, and this energy can be converted into frequency easily just by dividing the whole equation by Planck's constant. Fr nu is equal to m q to the power of 4 8 h cube epsilon naught square, and these values are simplified so that we can get a constant value 3 by 4 into Z minus 1 whole square. And if we substitute all the constant values, we get a constant quantity as 2.48 into 10 to the power of 15 hertz into Z minus 1 whole square. And this equation shows that frequency of that particular characteristic X-ray line directly related to a particular value, that is Z value, which is a whole number that directly depends on the atomic number. So this was the conclusion by the Moseley. He showed that some constant number assigned to the target materials, so that plays an important role in deciding the frequency of the characteristic X-ray lines. So what is the use of this Moseley's law? That has been well discussed in correction of periodic table and arrangement of the elements in periodic table. Moseley showed that X-ray energy has a strong dependence on an atomic number. By measuring the energy of the X-rays or the frequency of X-rays, of characteristic X-rays, characteristic of an element, that is nothing but its atomic number Z, can be unambiguously determined because their related to each other. So he did several experiments, series of experiments, and he found out the frequencies of k alpha lines for various elements, and he assigned a whole number to these elements and he named them as atomic number, and those atomic numbers are plotted on the x-axis, and a constant value square root of nu divided by RC, or since frequency divided by some constant, still you can say, you can take that is root of frequency. So root of frequency is plotted on y-axis. For a set of k alpha lines for different elements, when it was plotted in the graph, so it gave a straight line, and in the same fashion we get a similar straight lines for the L alpha lines as well as M alpha lines, and same is true for the beta series also, gamma series of X-rays also. He found that a plot of square root of frequencies against the position number of the element in the periodic table was very close to a straight line, not passing through the origin. He experimentally demonstrated that major properties of an element are determined by atomic number, not by the atomic weight. So hence he proposed that properties of elements are a periodic function of their atomic numbers. So when Moseley arranged the elements in the periodic table by their atomic numbers or number of protons rather than their atomic weights, the flaws in the periodic table that had been making scientists uncomfortable for decades simply disappeared. It means it became a good periodic table without any confusions. So Moseley's work proved that three elements that were missing from the periodic table at that time. So when Moseley arranged these elements in periodic table, not all the elements of the periodic table were discovered, and he could able to show that three elements must be present in nature, they are missing in the periodic table arrangement, and those elements were having the atomic numbers 43, 61 and 75, and later these elements were discovered, and many other people worked on the directions of the Moseley's work. They show additional gaps in the periodic table, such as atomic numbers like 72, 85, 87, 91. Those elements were also discovered later. So now let us see a brief discussion on Compton scattering. So Arthur H. Compton observed the scattering of X-rays from electrons in a carbon target, and how these X-rays are going to interact with some materials when they incident upon those materials. He found that scattered X-rays are having a longer wavelength than those of incident upon the target. When an X-ray photon having a particular wavelength interacts with a metal or any other material targets, whatever the photons that are passed through that target material, when we analyze them, we see that those X-rays are having the longer wavelength than that of the incident one. And schematic interaction process for Compton scattering is as shown in the figure. An X-ray incident photon having a particular wavelength, say lambda I incident wavelength, when it goes and hits the atomic target, say material, say carbon target, it will interact with the electrons of those material, and those electrons generally they are bound electrons, and those electrons will interact with this photon, and some part of the energy of this photon is transferred to this electron. So electron will recoil in a particular direction, and the photon, after losing a part of its energy, it will be scattered in another direction. So the scattered photon will always have a lesser energy and hence longer wavelength, and the direction of the scattering of this photon as well as recoil of the electron purely depends on how much energy is transferred to this electron, and he could able to arrive at an equation to show the difference between the wavelengths of the incident and the final wavelengths, and it was found to be lambda f, that is the final wavelength of the photon minus initial wavelength of the photon, is equal to delta lambda, that is a change in wavelength, that is equal to h by m naught c 1 minus cos theta. He could able to arrive at this equation based on this concept. Compton explained and modeled this effect by assuming particle nature of the light. It means the radiation, electromagnetic radiation, was not considered as a wave, but for this experiment, for this explanation of this experiment, he assumed that X-rays as photons, and he treated this scattering as particle scattering. Electron was taken as a particle, X-ray also was taken as a particle, say photon and electron interaction. So it is like a particle interaction, and by applying conservation of energy and conservation of momentum to the collision process between the photon and the electron, he could arrive at this equation. So wavelength increased with scattering angle according to the Compton formula. That for equation is already I showed that lambda f minus lambda I is equal to delta lambda, that is equal to h by MEC 1 minus cos theta, where this Me is the mass of the rest mass of the electron, c is the velocity of light, and h is the Planck's constant, and theta is actually the scattering angle for the photon. So we can discuss different cases for this equation. So when there is no scattering happening between the photon and the electron, when scattering angle of the photon theta is equal to 0, it means no scattering. Incident photon will travel in the same direction because it has not interacted with the electron in the target material. So cos of 0 is equal to 1, and hence delta lambda is equal to 0. It means that no scattering. So initial wavelength is equal to final wavelength of the photon. So that is proved in the equation also. And in the second case, when the theta is equal to 90 degree, it means the emitted photon after scattering travels in a direction perpendicular to the incident direction. So cos of 90 degree is equal to 0, and hence so cos theta becomes 0. So obviously 1 is remaining in the bracket. So 1 into h by MEC. Me here it is treated as m naught, that is the rest mass of electron. So therefore delta lambda is equal to h by m naught c, that is equal to 0.00243 nanometer. It is a constant value because the terms involved are all constants, and this particular value of this wavelength, change in wavelength, is treated as Compton wavelength. And the next case, that is the extreme case where photon undergoes head-on collision with the electron, that is when theta is equal to 180 degree, cos of 180 becomes minus 1, and hence delta lambda is equal to 2 times h by m naught c, because cos theta is minus 1, minus of minus 1 is plus 1, so 1 plus 1 becomes 2. So 2 times h by m naught c. So 2 times h by m naught c, that is equal to 0.00486 nanometers. And this is a brief discussion about Compton scattering. And in the next slide, we are going to have a simple comparison between Compton scattering and Raman scattering. Compton scattering is an inelastic scattering of photon from a free charged particle. If the charged particle is a bound electron, then the energy of the photon must be much greater than the binding energy of the electron. Scattered photon always have longer wavelength than the incident photon wavelength. Generally, high energy incident photons of the order of million electron volts undergo Compton scattering. So in case of Raman scattering, it is also an inelastic scattering of photons, but this scattering is due to molecules. Compton scattering was due to charged particles like electrons. Raman scattering is due to molecules. Photon interacts with the molecule and changes the molecule vibrational, rotation and electron energy values. Scattered photon can have either same energy or longer energy or shorter energy or lower energy, or in terms of wavelength also you can say same wavelength, longer wavelength or shorter wavelength than the incident photon wavelength. So generally low energy incident photons like those having few electron volts undergo Raman scattering. So this is a small comparison between Raman scattering and Compton scattering. So now let us have a look at X-ray scattering, that is with a specific stress on diffraction of X-rays. Here in this part we are going to discuss the Lave's work on diffraction as well as Bragg's work on diffraction. So first let us see Lave's work on diffraction. So Lave's diffraction. So the wavelength of X-rays are of the same order of magnitude as the dimensions of an atom. Wavelength of X-rays is quite shorter, and also atomic spacings in the case of an atom, they are also of the same order. Okay, that's why whenever X-rays pass through any material, they are subjected to diffraction. The atomic spacing acts as a diffraction grating for X-rays. A regular arrangement of atoms, as in a crystal, behaves much like an optical diffraction grating. Optical diffraction grating acts as a grating for visible light, whereas a crystal having a regular arrangement of atoms with definite spacing, so this acts as a grating for the X-rays. When a collimated beam of X-rays is directed at the crystal surface, making an angle theta with the surface, the X-rays will interact with the electrons of the crystal lattice and will be scattered. Just like there is a relation between slit width and the wavelength of light in optical grating, there will be a similar relation between the lattice spacing of the crystal, that is the grating spacing or grating constant, and the X-ray wavelength. Those X-ray photons which suffer Compton scattering will be lost from the beam, because Compton scattering is an inelastic scattering. There will be a change of wavelength and we don't have any control over the scattering direction also. And here in the case of diffraction process, we require only those X-ray photons which are undergoing elastic scattering. So elastic scattering part, or coherent scattering we call. Coherent scattering is actually happening due to Rayleigh scattering, and those suffering Rayleigh scattering will contribute to diffraction. The first X-ray diffraction experiments were carried out by von Laue using a continuous X-ray spectrum and the geometry as shown in the figure. He did series of experiments and he could able to get some plots like this. He took continuous X-rays, it means the X-ray beam contains all different valence of X-rays and they are made to pass through slits in order to get a fine collimated beam, and they are made to fall on a crystal similar, say for example zinc sulfide, and those X-rays after undergoing diffraction they are collected on a screen or a photographic plate, and after a certain period of exposure, and when we develop that photographic film, so we get a pattern like this. A particular pattern of bright spots was observed and it was having a definite arrangement, and those spots are actually called as Laue spots. He obtained a picture containing pattern of spots, each of which corresponds to coherent reflection of the X-ray beam from one set of crystal planes. This experiment is a demonstration of wave nature of X-rays. Laue established the relationship between occurrence of constructive interference and the distance of the atoms within a crystal. So he gave a rough equation like this: d dot delta k is equal to 2 pi m, where d is actually the interatomic distance, or you can say interplanar distance. Delta k is the difference between the incident and diffracted wave vector, and m is the some integer that is representing the order of the diffraction pattern. Pattern of the spots was a characteristic of the crystal structure of the material being examined. So based on the type of crystal structure of that material used, the pattern will change. So just by knowing the type of the pattern obtained, we can predict what type of crystal structure the material is having. Symmetry pattern of reflections on the photographic plate make it possible to deduce whether it is a cubic structure, hexagonal or other type of crystal structure that are existing in the sample. So it will only tell the type of the pattern, but mathematically it is very tedious to extract the values of the lattice constant. It means what is the actual distance between the atoms in different directions. So this kind of difficulty was made possible or eased by Bragg's diffraction. He made it further simple. He made some modifications in the experiment. Instead of using a continuous X-ray beam, Bragg used a monochromatic X-ray. So Bragg condition is a special case of Levy diffraction. It means Levy used a continuous X-rays, whereas he used a fixed wavelength. Gives the angles for coherent scattering from a crystal lattice. These Rayleigh scattered coherent waves interfere with each other either constructively or destructively, producing a diffraction pattern on a detector or a film. So resulting wave pattern, interference wave pattern, is called Bragg diffraction. So he deduced an equation known as Bragg's law. So he used monochromatic X-rays of a particular wavelength, say lambda, that are made to scatter from a crystal lattice of spacing d, and the peaks of the scattered intensity are observed when the following conditions are satisfied. The angle of incidence must be equal to angle of scattering. The path length difference, or simply path difference, is equal to an integer number of the wavelengths. It means path difference is equal to n lambda. It is similar to what we discuss in interference of light. So it is a schematic of the process that is happening when a beam of monochromatic X-rays is incident with respect to some incident angle theta, and they get scattered in a different direction with the same reflection angle, but with respect to incident direction, the angle will be 2 times that theta. And another beam, if you consider, say it is getting scattered from the second layer of atoms, it is also following the same direction, that will also suffer a change in direction of about 2 theta, and by geometry of this diagram, so we can deduce an equation to estimate what is the path difference created. The first ray travels a path from here to here and then here to here. Any other parallel wave that has been scattered from the next layer of atoms, if it is traveling up to here, up to this point, so then the path of the first ray and the second ray will be equal. From this point onwards, the second ray will also have the same path length as that of the first one, but the second ray will travel an extra distance here, This is nothing but the path difference, and if we estimate what is the path difference, the one part is actually equal to d sin theta and the second part is also equal to d sin theta. That's why the 2 times d sin theta is actually the path difference, and this path difference, if it is satisfying the condition for constructive interference, that is path difference is equal to n lambda, so then it will lead to a constructive interference between these 2 rays. If it is not satisfying, then it will be a destructive interference. So whenever there is a constructive interference, you get a maxima here. If it is a destructive interference, we won't get any maxima there. So the Bragg's law will be n lambda is equal to, that is the condition for constructive interference, and that must be equal to the path difference 2d sin theta. The condition for maximum intensity contained in Bragg's law above allows us to calculate details about the crystal structure, or if the crystal structure is known, to determine the wavelength of X-rays incident upon the crystal. So, in either way we can do the calculations. It means if dE is known, crystal structure of the crystal used is known, we can estimate what is the wavelength of X-rays incident, or if wavelength is known, we can estimate the D value. So, based on Bragg's law, Bragg's spectrometer was designed. So, in order to understand the crystal structure of different materials, crystal structure and structure of the complex molecules such as DNA in crystalline form are determined by using X-rays in X-ray diffraction spectrometer, or simply Bragg's spectrometer. The basic instrument used for such study is as shown in the figure. So, it will have a Coolidge tube for generation of the X-rays, and when electrons generated from the filament hit the metal target, X-rays are generated. X-rays generated means it will generate both continuous X-rays as well as characteristic X-rays, and Bragg spectrometer, or the principle used here, is based on the Bragg's law. Bragg's law requires that it must be a single wavelength, monochromatic X-rays are required. That is why some filters are used here. So, in order to remove the unwanted radiation, unwanted wavelengths, only a particular wavelength is allowed to pass through, and it will have a monochromatic beam coming out, and this beam is collimated to have a fine collimated beam, and it is made to fall on the crystal under study, and reflected beam will travel in another direction. In that direction we can keep a detector in order to measure the intensity of X-rays coming in that path. X-ray diffractometer will have an automatic arrangement in such a way that we can, if we can rotate this crystal like a prism table in a ordinary spectrometer, we can set different angles by rotating this. For every angle theta rotated, the detector has to be moved by an angle 2 theta. So, according to the geometry, we have to move it by 2 theta in order to collect the reflected beam. So, let us see the construction aspects. As already I told, nearly monochromatic X-rays are produced in an X-ray tube using characteristic X-rays. Matched filters are used to eliminate unwanted continuous X-rays, and also to optimize the energy of the X-rays for K alpha line. K alpha X-rays are particularly chosen for these kind of experiments. X-ray beam is passed through the collimator containing 2 slits made up of lead. So, in order to make that X-ray beam into a fine pencil of X-rays, turntable is kept in front of the collimator on which crystal is mounted. Ionization chamber is used as detector to collect the reflected X-rays. Ionization chamber is coupled to turntable in such a way that it turns through twice the angle to that of the turntable. If the turntable is rotated to an angle theta, so detector or ionization chamber has to be moved by double that theta value, double that angle value. So, now let us see the procedure, how the experiments are done to determine the crystal structure. A fine beam of monochromatic X-ray is made to fall on the crystal. The crystal reflects the X-rays which are collected by the ionization chamber. Turntable is rotated till a sharp increase in the intensity is detected. Sharp increase in the intensity detected means there the reflected X-rays are undergoing constructive interference. At other angles, it may not be a constructive interference. The sudden increase in the intensity suggests that Bragg's law is satisfied at that given angle theta. The peak in the ionization current occurs more than once for different values of n. It means for different orders of the diffraction. A plot of ionization current as a function of theta is as shown in the figure for a given crystal. I have taken the plot for calcium oxide. It is actually the experimental plot, somewhat looks like this. Calcium oxide plot I am showing here. The angle set in the turntable is shown in x-axis, whereas the intensity collected by the ionization chamber is shown on y-axis. So if we keep on turning the table by setting different angles here, so intensity will be lower, and after reaching some constructive interference positions, we get some peak like this, and when it moves further, it may be destructive interference once again, and when it is a sharp rise, it means a more strong interference is taking place over there, a strong reflection from the particular plane is taking place there. So thereby we get a strong peak here, and then once that angle is crossed, again a destructive interference may occur. Like that, several set of peaks are observed if we rotate the turntable through a full turn. So usually the angle set will be from a lowest angle to a maximum 90 degree. Within that, so we can get all possible reflections here. So now the procedure to find the lattice constants of unknown crystal. If you are given a crystal, if you are supposed to find out what is the crystal structure of that particular material given, so we have to follow these following steps. First, the experiment is performed to determine wavelength of X-rays using a standard crystal such as sodium chloride or calcium chloride or nickel, for which the interplanar spacing is known. These are standard crystals, so we have to use these crystals as standard crystals, and we have to perform the experiments, and by performing the experiment you can find out what is the wavelength of the X-rays. Now the experiment is repeated using an unknown crystal to determine the order of the diffraction peak, where the first peak is coming, at what angle, where the second peak is coming, and third peak is coming, like that, and n is equal to 1 for the first peak, n is equal to 2 for the second peak, like that, and their corresponding angles will be, the theta values will be theta 1 for the first peak, theta 2 for the second peak, theta 3 for the third peak, like that. We have to correlate them. Then the interplanar spacing of unknown crystal can be determined by using Brock's law. N lambda is equal to 2d sin theta, where lambda is already known by using a standard crystal experiment, and n is also known from the graph, the order of the peaks, and theta values are also known from the experiment, and only thing is we have to determine the d values. So therefore this equation can be rearranged to have d values. D is equal to n1 lambda divided by 2 sin theta 1. For a combination of n1 and theta 1, this ratio will be equal to d, and the same ratio is also satisfying the condition for the second order diffraction also, n2 and theta 2 combination, similarly for the n3 theta 3 combination. So thereby we can determine what are the d values of the crystal that has been given to determine. So that's all in this discussion. I thank you for your kind patience, and you can follow the next video on Exam Corner. So where I am going to review some of the questions related to this X-rays topic, and also I will try to solve some of the problems. Thank you.